Hi everybody, welcome to Divorce Workshop Talks. We're going to inviting on a mediator today. It's Nicholas. Nicholas is going to talk to decisions and mediation. So it's going to be a really interesting topic. Oh, there he is. Hi Nicholas.
Good morning.
Good
Hi,
morning.
good to see you.
Thanks for joining us today. I look forward to this topic. But first, give us a little introduction of what you do and where you're located.
I'm in New Paltz, New York, US, and I am a divorce mediator, which just seems to be my mantra these days as I am continually educating people about what that means. And the way I describe it is that I help divorcing couples settle out of court using the process of mediation, in which we work together to establish the terms of their divorce. They make the decisions, which is, of course, what we're going to be talking about this morning.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this topic, and I think many people are, if you want to explain that better to all of us and the importance of making your own decision in mediation.
Yes, absolutely. So I think what I want to do is just for the moment contrast mediation to litigation, which will help sort of fill out that picture, right? So there's a couple, they're getting divorced, that's clear to them. They sort of reach the first fork in the road, which is, how are we going to do that? We can litigate, which means that we have a lawyer representing each of us. Communication and decision making happens essentially through the attorneys. The attorneys will be speaking to one another. Sometimes the spouses are not even speaking to one another. Perhaps one of them has moved out. Possibly one of the attorneys or both of the attorneys has instructed them, don't speak to each other, just work with us. And many people that I've spoken to that had perhaps begun that process and then moved over to mediation didn't really know what they were getting into. And that can be pretty tough on them. It's already a tough circumstance. There's already some grief, which is something that I want to throw back to you a little later in the discussion. So to give people not only an awkward way of communicating about very, very sensitive subjects, the sale of the marital home, how they're going to be co-parents, etc. You're also giving them a platform in which to work that's very unfamiliar to them. Like, oh, I have to email my attorney or, call them and, oh, wow, it's costing me $400 an hour. I better be really concise with this email and like keep it as brief as possible. Suddenly it's really awkward for many, many people. So that's a little bit about litigation. So mediation is very, very different. It's much more human. It can be a little challenging for people when they first start because here's a person that you are divorcing, right? But you have to work with that person. But it does give you control, which is the kind of the first part of what I want to talk about in terms of making your own decisions. Now, again, we'll jump back to litigation. Sometimes, just by virtue of I'll continue to use the word awkward or unfamiliar platform that they're operating on, will cause some of the decision making to be kind of difficult and also clumsy. So with mediation, it's it's a discussion. I sit with the two people. It's very often virtual, although I've had a few people recently who picked me and found me online because they wanted to meet in person. It's like the pendulum is swinging back the other way post-COVID. So I am sitting with the two people virtually or perhaps in person and basically asking them questions. And in doing so, I am turning the control over to them to make those decisions. And the decisions themselves are what will be the terms of the divorce? How will they divide what they shared during marriage? And that can be marital home, debts, assets, retirement accounts, businesses, right? And then, of course, the all important shared parenting plan. How will you share the task, the joy, but the obligation of raising the children, which for many, many people is central to what they're concerned about in terms of what life will be like after the divorce. Okay, so we see those two possibilities. There are some others which are slight variations on those, but we'll just deal with those for now. So in mediation, one of the central tenets is that the couple makes the decisions. They are not being steered or corralled by attorneys. They are not forced to work within a limited range of choices that are perhaps offered to them by their attorneys, which will be generated, of course, from the conversations that the attorneys are having with each other about, like, look, how's this going to play out? We can do this or we can do this. In mediation, it can be much more granular because it's a real conversation. It's happening in real time. So I turn control over to the clients, right? That's the first part of what I want to talk about today, after having kind of gotten that sort of backdrop set for what this is and what's happening. What's happening in mediation is that the couple is making their own decisions. So is that okay? Have I got that part?
Yeah, that's good. I really like that because, I just wanted to say my own experience. I just went to litigation because I had no idea that there were the options out there, right? And that sense of having some control when it feels like everything's out of control can be helpful to know, right? So it's a good point there, right? That you do have some, you can help and make your own decisions about things. Where I think with litigation, as I've been through that, it's a little bit more challenging, as you said at the beginning.
Right. I mean, it's just, and we all kind of know this, sadly, sometimes after the fact, if we've gone through a litigated divorce, but we know what it's like. Even, for instance, if you're trying to arrange, you talked about, dropping your daughters off. Suppose you had to arrange that via text, but somebody said, well, arrange it with both of them in only 3 texts. That's all you get, right? That's the kind of thing that litigation can suddenly have a person in, because you start to think, oh my gosh, if I send this email, this email could cost me $100 if my attorney spends 15 minutes on it, and it might be more. So you really start to try and compress these actions. So it's similar. So I said, okay, arrange the pickup or the drop off of your daughters, but you only get 3 texts. That's it, right? So then you really want to think, okay, let's make sure that we're going to go to the right spot. What time we're going to meet? Am I going to take my car or Kurt's car because Kurt's doing something else? Like, it starts to it can get pretty tense, right? So whereas if you and your daughters are having breakfast together, you talk it out. Oh, well, Kirk is going to be using my car because he's doing something else. We'll have to take his, right, honey? Yeah, that's right. And was it the west entrance or the east entrance? No, we got to do west this morning. Boom, 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 it's done. It's very natural. It's very human. And that's sort of analogous to what I'm describing in mediation. We have a conversation. We ask questions. We set an environment that is respectful, cooperative, to the best of our ability, given what's going on. But we have a real-time, real conversation about things. So that, turns the control over to the clients. They have control over it, right? And the next sort of part of that I wanted to touch on was agency. So, and this is, I think at this point I can even get your input on this a little, Karen, as a grief counselor. There is grief here, right? That there's more than likely there's a degree of sadness, frustration, maybe anger, upset. This is a person that I fell in love with, that I started a life with, and now it's coming apart, and we're having to navigate all these really uncomfortable decisions, like, are we going to sell our home, or are you going to buy me out, or are you going to buy me out? So in that grieving type of environment, which I believe is what it is, it can be helpful, I think, for someone to take action when we're sort of through no fault of our own, somewhat stuck in the grief. Sometimes the very act of taking some agency and taking even some little step, like, okay, you know what, I'm going to do this. It restores that sense of wholeness,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps, or at least heads us in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you've seen in your work with divorce? Does that dissolve grief a little bit? Does it give it an avenue for expression?
Well, I also think that I don't think there's a lot of awareness, and we can talk about this another time, but I don't think there's a lot of awareness of the amount of grief that's associated with divorce.
Yes.
There's so many layers of loss that accompany the divorce process that not many people really understand. Like you mentioned, like the house, who gets it, who doesn't. Well, maybe you've been there 20 years and you love that house, but you just can't afford that house.
Yeah.
So that's loss. There's also the question that comes up is like, how much support are you getting? Because in divorce, it's so common that there's not a lot of support for that loss, right? Like people are like, well, everyone's getting divorced. What's the divorce rate? 52, 53%, right? So everyone gets through it. You'll be fine. Well, that doesn't really negate how you're feeling, right? Like you may have wanted to leave the marriage, but you're still struggling with everything that the layers of loss, like I said. So yeah, baby steps are one of the things. Actually, we have it in our workbook too. That's called baby steps. It actually helps decrease anxiety as well. As if you can take little baby steps to get your way through. Another thing I want to mention about grief is they need to learn to lean into it. So when they feel it, however you feel it, that's another conversation. They need to allow it to come and to be aware that if they're getting angry or upset or irritable or bowel issues or whatever, that actually could be grief. And that could come out in your negotiations too, right? Because they may be holding on to things that they haven't fully they're aware of it and or accepted and aren't allowing to come through, right? So
Yes.
anyways, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, definitely.
And your perspective on it is so precise, and I also loved how you said it reduces
Mm-hmm.
anxiety. Like that's a thing. It's this sadness and this grief that's taking the form of kind of excess energy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to channel it, as you said, also into little baby steps. This sense of agency, like taking control of the
Mm-hmm.
thing. So now you're on like a difficult ride, but you're
Mm-hmm.
in some way able to control it a little bit, and that reduces stress. I want to talk about that too, because that's so important.
Mm-hmm.
The number one thing, we hear this term, the best interest of the children, the best interest of the children. There's one thing that is in the best interest of the children, which is to keep conflict low. And there's
Mm-hmm.
a whole lot of research that supports this. To the degree that conflict is minimized or eliminated between the parents, the children will thrive. They're very
Mm-hmm.
adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's two households and a divorce, and mom and dad are not together anymore. Like it's not great, but they will adapt to that. They cannot adapt to continual stress,
Mm-hmm.
hypervigilance, like this continual background stress of there being conflict between the parents. So
Mm-hmm.
just that one thing is such a priority to keep stress low.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a few other aspects of why it's so important in divorce mediation for couples to make their own decisions
Mm-hmm.
is that they can customize to a very fine degree what it is that they're dealing with. Let's say it's a piece of the shared parenting plan. And I spoke about this earlier with the rather expensive and clumsy back and forth. If all of this communication is being channeled to attorneys, right? We can, in mediation, in minutes, get very granular about the fact that every fourth Wednesday, I have a commitment to some committee that I work with in my community, and I will need to pick up the kids a half an hour earlier to make sure that I can get them set up with dinner for me to make that commitment. Like that's hundreds of dollars and days of you know emails back and forth and trying to litigate that very fine point. So in mediation, we can really customize agreements to a very granular level.
Mm-hmm.
Also important, also providing each spouse with some agency and control over what's happening. And that can only happen if they're in charge of making their own decisions. Um, as an outgrowth of that, this is another aspect of the importance of spouses making their own decisions, is that when it's all done, and there is a separation agreement in place. There's also research to support the fact that there's much greater adherence to an agreement in which the spouses have made the decisions about what things will look like after divorce. How will these various aspects of everyday life be played out in this new reorganized family structure? And that's so important.
You know, Nicholas, I read that same research. Isn't that, and I think it has to do with the fact that they had some control in making it. Where in litigation, it's it's a more of a cookie cutter operation, right? Right. So I think people need to be aware, like if you're able to get through mediation, you're actually, both of you are probably going to work better together as well. Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
That can happen in litigation for sure, like what you call the cookie cutter kind of thing. But I've spoken to an alarming number of people who have gone through litigation who, and mind you, this is the 95% of cases that don't go to trial,
Mhm.
right? And that's another thing people don't realize. Only 5% of divorces go to trial. Those are the really, really difficult, what one of my colleagues calls a dumpster fire.
Mhm.
Those are the ones that cost tens of thousands and inevitably lead to unsatisfactory agreements that miss key points that were important that people just got fatigued about and just stopped fighting for.
Mhm.
And what does that lead to? Lower levels of adherence,
Mhm.
and there's more litigation or seeking for enforcement because the person, the ex-spouse, is not doing such and such, such and such. Right?
Yeah.
That's the 5%. But even the 95% that don't go to trial, that settle out of court, which is also shocking to
Mhm.
people, and they go, "Oh, really? That I didn't know that." We all have this from movies and TV shows. We have this imagining that there's going to be a trial and you're going to get to say your piece about such and such. Doesn't happen, right?
Doesn't
It
even
gets
work that way.
no, it gets settled on the courthouse steps, as they
Mhm.
say. Which usually it's in an office, but um, so those factors all put together, you have a very good high likelihood that the agreement will be adhered to because they created it.
Mhm.
They worked on it together, as difficult as that might seem, to establish this thing. I want to say one other thing. Go ahead, Karen.
No, I'm
Just want
just
to make
saying,
sure.
like that's another topic I'd like to talk to you in October or something. Is I'd like to talk to you about how sometimes it's difficult because I don't I don't want to paint that it's an easy rosy picture and it's all easy to do. And I think you're experienced enough to know that sometimes they break down, but that's where your role comes in. And so I wouldn't mind us talking about that another time because
Yeah.
there's obviously you have strategies on how you work with those two people, because one of the big things is when a marriage breaks down is the communication is gone, as well as there could be a lot of contempt and stuff. So anyways, that's just something I wanted to bring up that
Yeah.
we can talk about another time, but
Sure. That sounds
sorry.
like great info for a future Instagram Live. I will say this because it's very connected to this idea of control. That most people are smart. Like if they have the information, correct information, they'll
Mm-hmm.
make a good decision. So I will say to prospective clientele, look, this is what you can realistically expect if you litigate. I've even had
Mm-hmm.
it happen during mediation where one spouse will just say, well, if I can't get that, I'm just going to get a lawyer. And I asked them a question like, do you think that if you get a lawyer and you put 5,000 down as a retainer, maybe you end up spending 10,000, do you think that you will get this? And they'll say, well, yeah. And well, maybe not. And I begin to explain to them what they can realistically expect if they were to do this, right? And in the same way, even if it's at a point where they haven't made the decision to litigate or mediate, if it's put in front of them, look, this is going to be difficult. You will have to sit with this person, obviously, with whom it is not working out, and you decided to come apart and lead separate lives. This is one last window in which it will benefit you to work together. It will be difficult only in that you'll have to sit with them virtually probably not in person, but you'll have to sit virtually, and you'll have to work through difficult questions, probably in a way that to date you haven't been really good at doing. Or you can do this, and it'll cost you $100, every 15 minutes to work with your attorney. The same thing is going to be happening on your spouse's side. So let's consider this to be $200 every 15 minutes. That's coming out of your household to do these things. We can have a discussion that consists of A, B, and C, and I'll give them some topics that we might discuss. I won't let your ex-spouse yell at you or make a big scene. I won't let your ex-spouse smash things and throw stuff at you. That's not what we do in mediation. And it may be hard for you to resist the temptation to do that. And it may seem like, wow, this is really going to be hard if I have to sit and talk to this person. But I let them know realistically how hard it's going to be to answer the same questions, to go down the same roads, except it's going to cost you $200 every 15 minutes coming out of your household, and it's going to have to be done via email and phone calls, and you're never going to be able to be in front of that person, perhaps with some vulnerability, and saying, look, my parents built this house, so I'm really attached to it. That's the truth, and I help clients get in touch with that kind of thing, to let them communicate what is their interest in that house, not what is their position, which is I'm getting this house. We can shift that. So so I'm going to go back to what I said, which is that people are smart. If they're clearly illustrated for them what this is actually going to be like to work out the terms of the divorce, and here are 2 ways you can do it. Many times they say, okay, that it is going to be kind of hard, but at least it'll be practical. At least it'll be reasonable. At least we can have like a legitimate conversation about it. Even if I cry, I have a box of tissues behind me here in my office for people that come in person, and it's happened,
Sure.
That's not as hard. That's not as hard, and it does do the other things we talked about, right? Which are key points about why it's important for spouses to make their own decisions during divorce mediation. They can customize to a more granular degree. They can create something that gives them a sense of agency and control as they do it, which in turn reduces anxiety and grief, right? And ultimately, they will have something that they will be more likely to adhere to, right? And as a consequence of that, they can be assured that their now former spouse is more likely to adhere to the agreement. And all of this is much less polarizing than a litigation, much less polarizing than a fight, where as awkward as it is and as hard as it is, as we've discussed, they have to work together. They're not fighting about something. They're working it out together. And that, which is sort of like the cherry on top, is that reduction in conflict, that is the best thing you can do for your kid. And that's another thing that I have to focus people on.
I also want to just point out that for people that are on listening, that also mediation is confidential. So what goes on between the 3 of you isn't going to ever be public knowledge, correct?
That is absolutely correct. That's right. And for some people, it's really
important. It is, right? If there was affairs involved, or a public figure, or drug addictions, or something going on of the past, or whatever's going on, what goes on in mediation, as you're the mediator, I'm just saying that it is just between the 3 of you. So that's just something that I don't know if a lot of people know.
I make sure I tell them, absolutely, and many people do not. They also don't realize how available some of their information can be if they litigate, which is sometimes surprising to people. And all of these things, again, have to do with control and customization and reduction in stress. So if you know that not only is it confidential, but that even if the couple down the road decides to go to litigation, none of my notes can be subpoenaed. My forms can't be subpoenaed. I can't be subpoenaed to
Mm-hmm.
testify in any way. It's like it never happened,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's a future litigation. So it's as ironclad as
That's
anyone
great.
could ask for. Yeah. Also reducing stress.
I have one more question before we
Yeah.
see if anyone has any questions. Is now I know California, you have to go to mediation first, right? In California, I'm
I'm gonna
thinking that's
Yes, but I can't say that authoritatively. It's something I'm interested in myself, but I'm 99% sure that that is the case. Yes.
the reason why I'm bringing it up is because there seems to be a change in the family court systems, or that they're trying to get everybody to go to mediation first. They're trying to get that to start going
Mhm.
because of all the benefits that you said today, and plus many, many more we can talk about another date. But I'm thinking if California's gone that way, eventually a lot of states and some more countries are going to start, because I think Australia too may have it, maybe possibly
Mm.
be going that way. Like they're all seem to be like go to mediation first before litigation. So I just think I was just another thing that it's another benefit of that seems to me that the wave of mediation is becoming more and more popular as a better tool to work through, at least a big first step for couples to work through their divorce.
Yes. I spoke to somebody who I know personally who was a family court judge here in New York State. And his report was that the courts are overburdened and, frankly, would like not to deal with these things.
Mm-hmm.
That it's difficult, it's clumsy, it takes a long time, and anything they can take off their calendar, they would be happy to do that. That's right from a judge.
Yeah, and families, who knows the best? Who knows better than your family? You do. Like you and the couple know your family best, not the court. So
That's right.
it's best to try, at least try mediation, and as a first big step. So do we have any questions for Nicholas? If you do, just put them in the comment. Otherwise, anything else you want to say to wrap this up, this great live today?
I, I think that's it. I think that the underpinning of what we're talking about um, is why would somebody want to mediate rather than litigate? It's the very first fork in the road for a divorcing couple, and that's what most of my calls are when people find me
Mm-hmm.
online. They're calling to sort of find out about it. So there's this little bit of education that happens, and this control piece, and we've broken it down into some finer
Mm-hmm.
points, within the realm of control, is so important to mediation, and it's very often enough to get couples to say, "Oh yeah, let's mediate, let's mediate."
Okay.
And like I said, people are smart. If they have it in front of them, they'll see the sense of it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
We do have a question. If I have a difficult ex who I am sure will not cooperate in mediation, to start cooperating in mediation? If I have a difficult ex who I am sure will not cooperate, is there a point of starting start cooperating in mediation? Is that what you mean?
I think I get it. Like, is
Yeah.
there, okay, oh, is there a little refinement to the question? Is there any sort of, can you read it, Karen?
If I have a difficult ex who I am sure will not cooperate in mediation, or maybe do you start to cooperate? Like, do you start
Mhm.
cooperating in mediation?
I get the essence of it. Yes. To the question, thanks for the question. It's a really good question, and many people find themselves at that crossroads. Like, is this even worth doing? Look
Mm-hmm.
at what he or she has done so far. Are they gonna do this? Personally, I would say yes. Begin with mediation. It may be that you end up in litigation, but it will only help the circumstance to lay that sort of groundwork and know that it's a possibility. And there are a couple of things that can happen, right? If a couple chose that. One is that once the difficult spouse is in the mediated setting, sort of at the mediation table, they begin to realize, like, oh wow, this third party neutral, this person is here to help me. They're not going to let me be bullied. They're not going to let me um, be treated a certain way, and big web of words thrown around, all those sorts of things that sometimes divorcing couples complain about their spouse doing. A good mediator is going to cut through that and say, okay, wait, time out, time out. We had the essence of this issue that we're discussing is this. We have a couple of ways of dealing with that. You suggested this, you suggested this. The mediator may go on to say, here's another one or two things that you could consider. We need to make a decision about that. And the mediator can help the person drop what they call their position about something and help them get in touch with what their interest is, which means, why do you want such and such?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that alone is enough to kind of get them out of that fog of whatever it is, rage or, being uncommunicative or cold to the ex-spouse, all the things that contribute to them being difficult, so to speak. So that's just an example
Mm-hmm.
of the kind of thing that can happen. Once the person gets into mediation, they see the sense of it, and a good mediator needs to steer that discussion. Mediators can handle what they call high conflict divorces. Maybe not all of them. You definitely want to speak to a few mediators, explain
Mm-hmm.
the situation, and see if that mediator is comfortable working with the two of you. My hope is that you find somebody that can do that. I like doing it. It's just great to see people kind of come down, and their defenses come down, their fight or flight thing turns off, and they're able to regain control and agency and do something productive. So it's important that happens. That's one way that it can go. Another thing that can happen is that you begin mediation. They see what's going on. They see it as a possibility, but mentally or emotionally they're not ready. They go litigate. They get battered over there, and it costs them $5,000, $10,000, and then they come back to mediation. That can happen too.
Mm-hmm.
A number of my clients have talked about that. And sometimes it could take a whole year, but they reappear, and they're like, okay. I've already dumped a bunch of money into this. I haven't gotten as far as I wanted. I haven't gotten what I wanted, all that sort of stuff. And they realize, okay, mediation is a good way to go. It's very organic. So I would encourage the questioner, call some mediators, talk to some mediators, explain what's going on, and see. If it was me, I don't go into great depth at that initial contact. And what I endeavor to do is to set a no-cost consultation with both of them,
Mm-hmm.
so they see what it's like. It also saves me a lot of trouble. I mean, I could spend a half an hour on the phone with somebody, and they're, oh, my spouse, my soon-to-be former spouse is so difficult about this and this and this. And I say, okay, I get it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
your marriage isn't working out. Here's what I offer,
Mm-hmm.
and we can start with a free consultation. I might give them a little language about how to approach the spouse
Mm-hmm.
to facilitate that happening, to make it more likely that it happens, and they sit with me. And at that point, it's going to be really clear. Can this be mediated?
Right.
Will they work together? Am I the right person for them? So those are. I
Yeah.
hope that's helpful, questioner. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they're going through divorce, we have to remember about, I think statistically wise, it's like 10% are very, very amicable. 80% are moderate fight, like moderate. And then you have that higher 10% that you hear on the news, right? Or that are terrible, and the domestic violence and all that. But 80% is moderate. And so I think I talked to another mediator too, and they said the exact same thing. Give it a try, because maybe you can get some things resolved with this difficult, challenging person, or like maybe the parenting plan can get figured out, or right, you know what I mean? Like give it like I think your advice is good, because I think it's at least attempt to try to do the better way, the easier way for divorce. So
Right.
anyways,
Absolutely.
so anything you want to tell people where they can get you, your webpage? I know you want to talk about your Instagram account.
I think Instagram is great because you get to see the person's face, you get to hear them speak, you really get a sense of who they are. So you can definitely check me out at the.reset.divorcemediation, the.reset.divorcemediation. And I touch on a whole bunch of topics that answer this kind of question
Mm-hmm.
and fill out people's understanding of what divorce mediation is like. And then, of course, there's my website, which is the Reset divorcemediation.com. And I look forward to
Yeah,
speaking with anybody needs this kind of service.
yeah, just DM either of us, and if you DM me, I'll send them over. I'll send them over to you. So it was great to have you on. I'd love to have you on again, and take care, everybody.
Thank you all. Karen, always a pleasure to see you and speak with you. You're
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thank
Pretty
you.
soon.
Take care, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.